When will Bitcoin rally to new all-time highs? If we look at this chart, we can see that there is a very clean and recurring tendency where we see Bitcoin break to new all-time highs across cycles just after the halving. That's what we're going to be talking about in a lot of detail in today's episode. So subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward, and let's dive right into it. So breaking down the pre-halving periods in 2015 and 2016, you can see here that there is an 8-degree angle on this key resistance trend line from the top of the bull market in 2013. And then also around here during the pre-halving retrace, we can see a lower high resistance check here at this trend line before, after a final dip, we break above this key trendline resistance, turn it into a new support, and then actually break beyond the old all-time high established in 2013, and then we actually hold it as a support before rallying towards the upside into new all-time highs. And then once again, we see new all-time highs here on Bitcoin, a 8-degree angle trendline form, reject price at around these regions here, force price into a downtrend going into the halving, final rejection here just after the halving, then fantastic breakout, retest of this same trend line into a new support, and then we break beyond in the following months to new all-time highs, eclipsing those old all-time highs established in December 2017. We rally then to new all-time highs, and then the cycle potentially repeats with a 8-degree trendline resistance developing here, and only after the halving is something we can expect in terms of retesting that trendline resistance into a new trendline support. And you can see that this happens just after the halving, and before, or at least after we see a retest, we break to new all-time highs. We break those old all-time highs and rally into a pretty much uninterrupted uptrend afterwards. And that's something that potentially lies ahead. And one of the things about this trend line after the halving, that trend line, given how it's at an 8-degree angle, it could represent 39k after the halving. And if we focus on this chart right over here, after the halving, it takes around 90 days to around 150 days to retest this trend line and then break to new all-time highs. So the entire process of retesting this and breaking to new all-time highs takes around 3 months to around 5 months. And what if this process is actually extending in time, right? Because after July 2016 halving, we saw 90 days, and here we saw 153 days. So what if we can see anything closer to potentially 190 or even 200 days after the halving? Well, whatever the scenario, anything up to 200 days after the halving is where we should see a successful retest of this 8-degree angle support trend line into a new point of demand that would springboard price into new all-time highs and beyond. Historically, turning this trend line into a support has yielded a fantastic uninterrupted uptrend to new all-time highs, and it's something that maybe we could keep in mind for the future as well. But of course, diminishing returns beyond the old all-time high. Here in 2016, 2017, you can see that this is a diminished return, and we'll probably see the same thing in this cycle. So if we just do this, then we're very close to 100k, maybe get some upside wicking into 100k plus. But whatever the case may be, there is diminishing a rate of return, and a few months after the halving, we should be able to both retest this trendline as a new support and then break to new all-time highs and beyond. That's what the history is suggesting to us, and it's showing us with this 8-degree angle trend line, which is absolutely crucial to being retested as a support. And that only just happens after the halving, because going into this halving event, you can see how this is a really strong point of rejection, and technically we haven't even revisited this level in this cycle, we haven't even revisited this trend line for a rejection. And of course, bulls might want to argue that in the next 2.5 months that we have left in 2023, that we could rally here and reject here. But even 2015, in the year 2015, we didn't revisit this level, only just before the halving. So if we see this level get revisited just below the halving, or at least just before the halving, then we could rally to around 40k before the halving, before dropping to actually these current levels once again. We could drop into these current levels of 26, 27, 28, even 30 around the halving, because we tend to see a strong pre-halving retrace just a few weeks before the halving event. That's something really to emphasize, because this pre-halving event is the last dip before you get that important retest of that 8-degree angle trendline resistance into a new support before breaking to new all-time highs. You can see here pre-halving retrace, and then that fantastic, really important retest of the trendline, and then that's also something I'm expecting going into the halving. Pre-halving retrace of some sort, whether we reject from 40k or a bit lower, that remains to be seen. But going into the halving event, probably a retrace lies ahead, and after that retrace we would recover into this red diagonal resistance, maybe reject from it in the short term. You can see how we reject in the very short term from this trend line, but nothing to be really worried about, because that's going to be very small volatility, the last sort of shakeout before we see this shakeout as well on a dip. But that's a buy the dip opportunity here as well, buy the dip opportunity, which is essentially a technical retest. Really important not to get shaken out, whether it's a rejection from this trend line or a dip into that trend line at higher prices to turn this level into a new support before rallying towards the upside. It's something that we really need to keep in mind, not to get shaken out after the halving event, because after the halving event, history suggests that we try to establish ourselves at those highs before preparing for just more parabolic highs and movement towards the upside. So really important to focus on this trend line going forward. But after the halving is when we'll see this region really act as a demand area. This is the level that's going to propel price to revisit 60k, and then we'll see a breakout beyond that point quite comfortably, because whenever we've revisited the old all-time highs, maybe we've spent and actually seen some sort of rejection at the highs, but generally speaking, reaccumulation at those highs. Here we also, well, we didn't really see much reaccumulation. We just rallied to new all-time highs and that was it. So any sort of reaccumulation at around these highs, that's probably going to be that final signal before breaking to new all-time highs and beyond. So at the moment, this 8-degree angle trendline hasn't been retested or even tested as a resistance. But after the halving, it's probably going to change from a point of rejection where people, sellers in particularly, are weighing down on price. This point of rejection and resistance where sellers are resisting price and rejecting price, this is going to suddenly turn into a point of support where buyers are happy to buy at these prices and support price into a new uptrend. This is where people are going to be bargain buying essentially, and of course these are bargain buying levels in comparison here, but after the halving, when we see the block reward get cut in half, this is going to be a very different scenario. This is going to be very different market psychology right over here compared to what we're seeing right over here. Here we're going to see a lot of optimism and belief in Bitcoin rallying to new all-time highs, and rightfully so, because that's what's going to probably happen a few months after the halving, and then we can enjoy a parabolic uptrend to new all-time highs months after the halving. That's where we're going to enter the most parabolic phase of the cycle, and that's where you'll see the most greed, exponential price action towards the upside, most optimism, FOMO, new paradigm shifts, or at least shouts and claims for a new paradigm shift and this going to 1 million. That's going to be that phase in the cycle, and it's something to be looking forward to. But for the time being, feel free to check out my video in the top right hand corner for more insight about why we think that we are still in a bull market, 3 reasons why we are in a bull market for Bitcoin, and I'll speak to you in that one. Subscribe to more videos and speak to you soon.